Welcome to a special edition of Legal AF on this platform. Regardless of which contributor you enjoy, whether it's the Pragmatic Optimists or it's the Court Accountability Action or the Court of History people, we all have a certain angle. We bring to this platform a certain voice and a point of view that comes from a lived experience. And at the end of the day, I'd say 90% of the time we're talking about, as we should, calling out the Trump administration, its depravity, its immorality, its illegality, and criticizing, as we should, expressing our First Amendment thought and expression in the right way to bring our audience together. But there always needs to be a call to action. What can we do about it? It's not that we're on the Titanic and we've hit the iceberg and now what do we just play the violin? Or is there something that we can do, right, to get off the ship, right, and get to land and get to dry land? And I can't think of better people to talk about these very important issues, this national conversation that we have to have about how do we get back, tens of millions of Americans who literally sat out the election, sat out democracy, as I like to say, and said, I don't like either of the two brands. I don't like either of the two parties. What is the compelling messaging that elected or candidates for election on the Democratic side, what is the messaging that they have to bring forward in order to make them appealing again to grab this generation of voter? I want to bring in Rachel Cohen and Senator Tiara Mack, who, when they're together, they're pragmatic optimists, an amazing playlist here on Legal AF. Rachel Cohen, as everyone knows, started her career as a corporate lawyer for a large Am Law 3 firm called Skadden Arps, where I actually started my career as well. But, couldn't take it anymore and decided in protest to leave that firm and start working in the political arena as a protest against certain things that she saw about big law and what they were or were not doing against the Trump administration. Tiara Mack, an elected representative in Rhode Island, working every day for the people there, but also has a national perspective. And you've got a new grassroots group that you've put together. Tell, I don't know who wants to go first, but tell the audience about your view, your lens, and what this grassroots group, American Demands, is all about.
Sure, I can start us off. So we really wanted to make sure that there was a plan for winning in 2026 and beyond for Democrats. Republicans came in with a plan and a vision called Project 2025, and Democrats royally lost to the last election because we could not deliver a cohesive and comprehensive vision for Americans. And since we have lost both the presidency, the House, and the Senate, we have not come up with a plan for how we are going to win back millions of Americans who decided that it was better to stay home than to invest in a future and a vision for America that Democrats couldn't articulate. And so what we decided as a group of about 5 individuals brought together through a group chat was that we needed our own Democratic Project 2025. We needed to have a bold, comprehensive vision that could bring Americans back into believing in something, and that something is hopefully the Democratic Party or what comes after. We realize that we have to deliver on affordability. We have to deliver on livability. We have to give people hope that their wages will not just remain stagnant as the cost of rent and the cost of groceries continues to price people out of neighborhoods and out of living. And we have to make sure that we are addressing the real root cause of a lot of our problems, in that billionaires are simply not paying their fair share. And this administration has shown that they are in the pockets of every single person making decisions, including some of our Democratic leaders. And so instead of waiting for our Democratic leaders, Jeffries and Schumer, to come up with some uninspiring platform, we decided, hey, Rachel, shouldn't it just be us?
And that's how we fair. We did a lot of kind of background research, and the 5 of us that worked on this are lucky to be pretty well connected in Democratic spaces because we are all capital D Democrats. And we did a lot of background research to find out if people were working on a kind of not even just platform, but vision. How are we marketing the party? Because I think that Republicans are known for being extremely cohesive. They haven't always been. We forget the Tea Party and the total almost takeover of the Republican Party by forces that allowed Donald Trump to then become president. But it seemed like all of the focus, to the extent there was focus on platform, was really focused on 2028 and what was going to happen with the president. And I think there's a real opportunity for Democrats to present a cohesive, affirmative, exciting vision for America going into the midterms. And so our American Demands platform has 8 taglines. They're very accessible, things like raise our wages and end endless wars. And there's more specifics on the website under each of those taglines. What does that mean? Raise our wages. We want a set $18 minimum wage that extends to people who are incarcerated, for example. With end endless wars, we want the repeal of standing AUMFs, authorizations for use of military force, which I think Tiara and I are going to talk about on Pragmatic Optimists this week in the context of Venezuela. But the kind of congressional action that's possible, because my great fear is that the Democrats take the House or the Senate or even both back, and then general public continues to view them as ineffective because they haven't united behind a vision and said what they're going to do. They're just elected in because people are understandably very unhappy with Donald Trump. And that's not how I want to be going into the 2028 presidential election.
Yeah, that was the big difference between Trump 1 and Trump 2. Trump 1, he wasn't organized. He didn't have the Heritage Foundation writing the script for him. He brought a lot of old school country club Republicans and hawks with him into the White House that were not his. Right now, if you're 20 and loyal, Donald Trump's going to give you an amazing job on levers of power, as opposed to a 50-year-old who's been a civil servant and has served this country admirably for decades and knows what they're doing with legacy knowledge. You're out. The 20-year-old podcaster is in. Say goodbye.
Actually, Popok, one of the guy who took over USAID and dismantled it, which literally killed so many people already and will continue to cause the deaths of so many more, is, I believe, 27 and was in my random orientation fantasy football league at Harvard Law School. So they're not sending their best at fantasy football or at governance, quite frankly.
You got Paul Ingrassia, who's in the middle of a sex scandal where he, in Orlando, he had a female staffer's room reservation canceled so that she'd end up in his room. He's 2 years out of law school. He was going to be, I don't think he will be now, the Office of Special Counsel, the watchdog for the federal government. EJ Antoni, 2 years beyond his PhD from some school we've never heard of, writing about economic policy, not qualified to be, and now has been pulled from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. But you're right. If you look at the map, now that we've had time to digest the map fully, I know a lot of Democrats look at the map and like, oh no, it's the magnification of America. They've all turned red. I don't see the map that way at all. And having lived through 2 Barack Obama terms and a Bush term and the rest, a president is for the moment. Biden doesn't get elected, I don't think, if it's not COVID and we weren't coming off of the chaos of the Trump administration. Carter gets elected because of a Nixon. Obama gets elected because we're looking for a new generation, and he's Obama. But the person is the answer for that particular moment. The question is, what is the question that we're looking for the answer to for the midterms and beyond? And what can the Democrats do? Sure, look, I'm not a democratic socialist, but do I think there's aspects of what Bernie Sanders and AOC and Mamdani are there aspects of that could filter their way and should filter their way into the Democratic platform? For sure. When you guys talk about affordability and wages and all that, let's say you got all the money, you got another 5 points on tax rates for the billionaires and other things, adjustments, and suddenly instead of hundreds of billions of dollars coming in with these phony tariffs, they come in to a social program. What do you do with the money? How does it get distributed?
It's in our kind of overarching. We have one of the people in the group is extremely wonky and worked in Green New Deal kind of Biden administration implementation. And so we have stuff in there about light rail. And I think that question itself, Pope, is we should know the answer to that question from the Democrats, right? And I think that's what's really scary to Tiara, to myself, to many of our peers when we talk about it, is that if you go to a random person on the street and say, what do the Democrats stand for? I think right now the answer is not being Donald Trump. And there are individual Democratic leaders that that's not the case for. But if you go and say, what does Donald Trump stand for? Oh, build the wall. Oh, American protection, tariffs, things like that. And I think that the red map that you've described, so much of that is about turnout. And I feel, even as someone that has my entire life been a Democrat, I felt in the last election, and I'm not pointing fingers as to whose fault this is, there were so many different things at play, but I didn't feel like I was really voting for concrete things. And instead I was kind of being asked to vote to keep Donald Trump out of office. And when
You
Democratic voters...
That's because you were.
Exactly. And
Right.
so we just don't want that to be, God forbid he runs for a third term, which I think is a really serious consideration if his health holds out. I don't want to be in another situation where we've had 4 years to kind of come up with ideas of what we're asking people to vote for. And instead we're only asking them to vote against things, because that's just not a resonant message to the American public. And I know that because I don't find it a resonant message as somebody that hates Donald Trump with every fiber of their being,
Yeah. Tiara, what do you think? What's if everything goes exactly the way you and Rachel hoped it would by forming American Demands?
Mm-hmm.
What's the payoff? Where are we a year from now?
I think we're at people being able to live in communities where their parents grew up in, where they grew up in, and they're able to buy homes, or they're able to rent, or they're able to find great quality jobs and are not shoved out of the economy and out of the job market because of unregulated AI. We're going to have a generation of people. We already have a generation of people who don't believe the American dream is possible because the price tag is now $5 million in order to achieve the American dream. We have tons of elected officials who are riding on the Democratic wave, but without a true vision, and who are not fighters. And we've seen during this Trump administration that the Democrats don't really pack a punch. They have a lot of bark, kind of, but no bite in order to shove through any resident message that gets to people. So in a year, if we get a majority of charismatic Democrats who can say, I give a damn about people being able to live in every single community across the country, in urban and rural communities, the ability to make a living wage, I believe that every single person should be able to go to the grocery store and not go bankrupt or rely on crowdfunding from GoFundMe. We believe that healthcare should be a fundamental right for every single person, like every other developed nation in the entire world. And I think it is such low-hanging fruit for us to call those things out. And when I knock on doors with people in my district and when I talk to voters, one of the main things they say is, well, why should I vote for Democrats, or why should I vote at all? Because my rent goes up every single year. I am being pushed off of potentially healthcare programs or food assistance programs, and their lives have not gotten better under Democrats, and their lives are still kind of getting worse under this current administration. So people, and I want to diagnose the problem as not a red map, but of people feeling frustrated that the status quo did not work. So what are we going to do to change the status quo? And how do we get people invested in a real strategic vision?
And we have opportunities, Pope, we have opportunities for people to plug in and to encourage their elected representatives to, I think that there's a big divorce. People feel like they have no control over the policy of the parties anymore. It just feels like you're presented with two options and you go with whatever the least bad is. But AmericanDemands.com has a number of resources that are like flyering related. You can bring stuff to No Kings. You can call your representatives. You can make them aware. And we have a test case special election coming up in December in the Tennessee 7th, where Afton Bain is signed on, up or down, to the full platform, because that is kind of the theory of change here, is that there is a platform that's up or down. It's non-exhaustive. There's so many other things that aren't on there that you can work on. That's a passion project. But if you are a federal level elected and you're signing on to American Demands, you're saying, I will fight for every single thing on this list. And so we have a nominee the Democratic nominee in Tennessee 7 is signed on. And I think that we're going to see a really big swing. She's running a progressive campaign in what's historically considered a pretty red district. And we're feeling optimistic.
I think that's what you have to do. I mean, the Democrats have had a habit where we've ceded territory to the political territory, to the Republicans. And now we find ourselves sort of stranded on an island of our own making, right? It was like, well, we're not going to fight in state houses, so we're going to allow more red controlled state houses. We're not going to fight at school boards. We're not going to fight at local, as you know, you know this, most of this better than me, Tiara, Senator Mack. But we're not going to fight in school boards. We're not going to fight for local elections and council and commissioners. We're just going to hold out for the presidential election and see what happens and let the map fall where it is for Congress. And I'm like, that's our plan? That's a terrible plan, because it's still the case that if you strip the labels off of what people presume to be the Democratic primary policies and those of Republicans, they want to go Democrat. But then you put a name on it, or right, you put and then it's, oh no, I don't want to do that. And as the one of our scholars within the Democratic Party once said, Bill Clinton, the problem we're having is that people would rather a candidate be strong and wrong than right and weak. And so Trump is strong and wrong. He checks all the boxes. He just checks all the wrong boxes for 60% of America, right? But people like that more than like sort of the weakness. The problem the Democrats, as Rachel alluded to, many problems in the last election, but one of them is Democrats like process, and we like time to live with our candidate, and we like a primary system that tests the mettle, because we've always said that the number one thing that you could judge a candidate on, especially one that hadn't been, let's say, maybe vice president, there's a lot of responsibility there, is how they run, how they are the CEO of their presidential campaign. Barack Obama ran a 10 out of 10 presidential campaign, and it helped get him elected, along with amazing political advisors and strategies that were adopted by him and used today. But we never got to see Kamala through a primary process be tested. We never got to know her in 12 or 20 days of primary as well. We didn't see her run a campaign. We just saw her raise $1 billion, spend $1 billion. And do I get elected now? No. That's not how that works. We like process. It's just part of our two-party system. So I like the fact that you guys are starting early. How can people get involved? I mean, we'll put in the notes below the link to the website. But how can people, when they say, I like these two, I want to get more involved, what do they do?
There's a whole action kit on the website. We're very lucky. It's a very good website. Shout out to our friend Michelle, who did it for free, because that's the other thing is, none of us are getting paid for any of this. And I think that is tough, but it also is why it's, I think, quite strong and aligns with what people on the ground actually want. So on AmericanDemands.com, there's flyers you can print, there's scripts, there's postcards, there's all of these things that you can do to encourage federal level elected officials to sign on. And we're going to, over the course of the next however long, be building out kind of volunteer structures for people like Afton Bain who have signed on, so that, listen, do we think this takes over the entirety of the Congress in 2026? No, but it is a powerful way to signal that what gets people excited about the Democratic Party is not when they go onto that island of their own making and allow the Republicans to dictate what the parameters of the argument are. It's when they come up with an affirmative vision that sounds exciting and new and different, because things are pretty bad.
I'll tell you where else, and this is just a suggestion. I'm happy to talk offline about these things too. The other territory that we ceded, as we know from the Charlie Kirk movement, is on college campuses.
Yep.
Just having a college Democrat, a college Democrat office, that's not going to do it. There's an entire group of progressive and moderate and Democrats, liberals on college campuses that have no leader, no movement, and Midas tried to do it a number of years ago. They had these Midas University chapters, and it sort of took off, but then they lost a little bit of interest in it. But I think there's a tremendous amount of work that needs to be done on college campuses around the country. Have you guys thought about that as well?
Totally. We have someone working on a college toolkit right now. And I just generally agree. I think we got so used to Democrats being cool that I think we just kind of missed that we're not anymore.
When did I stop?
Cool. We're cool.
We're cool. Right. But the others.
I think the definition of cool changes, but we have to keep up with it. Right now, or some of our leaders that are the faces are not the people that are in power. You see the AOCs, the Bernies, the Mamdanis, who are the cool politicians, the squad. And oftentimes those folks are at the margins of the Democratic Party and are not often the voices that are listened to. And then you have other factions, whether it's Working Families Party or Democratic Socialists. And I think so many people are ready to put people in buckets without saying, we all have the same vision. We're all on team blue, big D Democrat. Yeah. And we have a vetted interest in making sure that everyone's lifted up. So when we see something like Mamdani working, or we see the successes of AOC, we have to lean into that. And so far, we haven't been successful at getting the Democratic Party to really lean into those like natural leaders in the party.
Yeah, if Biden had taken on a progressive Democrat, which there were some choices there besides, and I liked Kamala at the time, but if he had taken on more of a progressive Democrat and had decided to leave office after he said he would, we would have been in I think a different boat right now than and Nancy Pelosi spent a fair amount of time keeping the progressives in place instead of really integrating them into the big tent of the Democratic Party. But they're aging out literally, and new faces are coming in. We'll have to see what happens. There's some exciting new faces in the Democratic Party that are running for Congress, as some of which are supporting your group. So I would just tell everybody, if this is the first time you've met Rachel and Tiara, they are the Pragmatic Optimists. They are political activists and strategists in their own right, and they've come together for this organization here that we're so proud and happy to support on Legal AF, called American Demands. All the information for them is down below in notes. And then if you want to know more about them, they're doing 5-6 videos every week. Look up Pragmatic Optimists on a playlist right here on Legal AF. And while you're here, hit the free subscribe button. Plus, you'll catch a lot of both of them on our social media platforms. Substack, Rachel does a lot of work over there with us, and we cross-promote her work on TikTok and Instagram and all that great stuff. So I'm hoping if this is the first time, but it won't be the last time, that you're going to be trying to find all the work that Rachel and Tiara are doing. Thanks for getting together with me here and talking about your new grassroots group.
Thanks so much, Pope.
Michael Popok signing off with Rachel Cohen and Tiara Mack. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.